What you know, alibis? Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. Good to have you here. We are going to jump right into the afternoon testimony in the Kouri Richins trial. The witness I've been waiting for, Carmen Lauber, the housekeeper who sold Kouri the fentanyl, took the stand. She currently works with people who have disabilities, but she does have a history of drug use, starting back when she was in the 6th grade, smoking marijuana, which later on, she started using cocaine, LSD, acid, mushrooms, and that continued into most of her adult life. She has sold drugs and she has a criminal history involving drug possession, distribution, felony convictions for drug distribution, and she's currently on probation for distribution. She gets random tests for drugs, and she also has pending charges for marijuana possession and possession of a gun by a felon. She's been sober for over 4 years, and this is the longest time since 6th grade that she has been clean, except for when she was pregnant. She did stop using drugs, but went back as soon as the baby was born. She did get immunity for testifying in this case in Summit County and Salt Lake County, as well as the federal government. In Wasatch County, she got immunity for the gun and marijuana charges there. If she tells the truth, there will be no charges filed back on her. But before she got the immunity deal, she did talk to investigators 6 or 7 times for a total of 10 plus hours without any promise of immunity. I will say she's very genuine. And one thing that I have heard is that she was so devastated when she found out that the drugs she got for Kouri were used to kill Eric that she still keeps his obituary on her mirror. And she does get very emotional talking about this at times. Prior to the grant of immunity, with the interview she did, she had not consulted with an attorney because she was incarcerated. She met Kouri through Kouri's aunt's house cleaning business, and she cleaned Kouri's house every week, sometimes more if it was needed. She knew Kouri for the 9 years that she worked for Kouri's aunt. She also cleaned and helped Kouri with landscaping. They didn't specify here, but I do believe it was at some of the properties Kouri was flipping. And Kouri knew about her drug issues. Kouri would reach out and ask her how drug court was going. Carmen had been in drug court since the end of 2021, and she would keep Kouri updated like she was close to graduating or things like that. She knew Eric because she cleaned for him, and she would also take her grandkids to their kids' parties, or they would go over for barbecues. And she smiles as she says that Eric would come in, and if they were working past 5, he would jokingly tell her to go home. She knew he had the stonemasonry business, but didn't know any of his employees. Kouri asked Carmen to buy illicit drugs 4 times, and Carmen did. The first time she bought through someone named Susan Kohler, and the second, third, and fourth time she bought those through Robert Crozier. She refers to him as Robbie. The first purchase was through Susan Kohler. Kouri asked if she could do her a favor. Kouri called and asked if she could reach out to somebody for pain meds for an investor she knew. Carmen said she would see what she could do, and she knew Susan was still using. She reached out to Susan, and Susan got back with her and said she knew somebody who had pain medication. She actually knew Susan through Kouri's aunt who she worked for. Carmen said the reason she quit is because Susan and she said they were still using drugs. Kouri reached out first at the end of January, early February. She couldn't quite remember. And for the first deal, Carmen asked for an opiate. Carmen gave Susan $600 of her own money, and then a couple of hours later, Susan came back with an envelope that had pills in it. She didn't open the envelope, but she could tell what they were. Kouri came to her driveway the next morning and gave her the $600 back and took the pills. All of the text messages between Kouri and Carmen, she deleted them because she said if I lost my phone or if drug court wanted to see her phone, it would be a violation. When she bought from Robbie Crozier, Kouri texted and said her investor needed something stronger. So Carmen reached out to another acquaintance named Nicole Cummings. She knew that Nicole was still using and sent her a message on Facebook Messenger. They show this on the screen. It's from February 5th, 2022. Remember, there was the first attempt on Valentine's Day, by the way. Carmen said, text me. I've got a question. I won't do it on this. Nicole asked for her number and they spoke over the phone. She asked Nicole if she knew anyone who had opiate pills for sale, and she said she had a friend named Robbie Crozier who could help. She gave Carmen his phone number, and Carmen called him. She asked if he knew anyone who had pain pills for sale. He said he would reach out to a couple of people and got back in touch with Carmen and said a buddy had fentanyl. Carmen texted Kouri back and said she could get fentanyl, and Kouri said, okay, go ahead and get them. So Carmen in turn tells Robbie to get those. But this time she did not front the money. It was $1,000. So she told Kouri the amount and how she wanted her to drop them. Kouri told her to go to a house in Midway she was flipping and the money would be there. They show a photo of the outside of the house. Kouri told her the back door was unlocked, and it was, so she went in. There was money in a box in a closet that had coffee cups in it. She called Robbie back and said she had the money and asked how long it would take him to meet her. Nancy, her friend, drove her this time, and they show selfies of them in the car. They text back and forth what cars they'll be in, so she gives Robbie the money, and he said he would be back. He returned with a clear baggie with round pills that had 15 to 20 in there, according to Robbie. Those pills were light green in color. She left and texted Kouri telling her she had the pills and asked what she wanted her to do with them. Carmen didn't want those in her house. Kouri told her to put them in a shed at a house in Midway, but Carmen was not comfortable leaving those in an open shed, so she dug a hole in the fire pit, then covered it with gravel, and then put a brick over it to cover up where she had dug in. They show a photo of the fire pit. There's a fire in it. So clearly this is after everything, and they ask, was the fire burning when you buried those pills? No. They bring in 2 documents with Kouri saying Carmen did community service hours. Carmen had been late to group therapy a few times, and her punishment was the judge tacked on some community service. Carmen asked Kouri if she knew anywhere she could get a letter on letterhead saying she did her community hours. Kouri said she would look into it. Later on, Kouri handed these letters to Carmen, and the letters said that Carmen had worked on the family ranch cleaning horse stalls, walking horses around the corral, things like that. Carmen, on the stand, says she had never set foot on that ranch. And it didn't go well for Carmen when she gave those letters to the court. She was sent to jail for a day and got more community service hours. She's asked, why would you do that? Carmen said, I didn't have time to do community service because she was doing drug runs for Kouri. And she also says when you're getting clean, you test the waters to see what you can get away with. And she said at the time she was continuing drug distribution to see if she could get away with it. The second deal with Robbie came at the end of February. Kouri approached Carmen again and said her investor needed something a little bit stronger. Carmen explains, you can't just say, here's what I want. If you're getting man-made pills, you get what you get. And she says this because Kouri had asked for the Michael Jackson stuff, which is propofol, which is used in an operating room setting, very controlled. You're with an anesthetist or an anesthesiologist, and they monitor your breathing because it can cause respiratory distress, which is what killed Michael Jackson. Carmen did not know what the propofol was, so she had to Google it. The transaction was done at the same house, and she entered the same way and got the $1,000 from Kouri in cash. She got back in touch with Robbie, asked if his friend had any of those pills left. They texted off and on. He said, give me a day or two. But when he said he could get them, she let Kouri know, and her friend Nancy drove her back to that Maverick in Draper. While they were on the way, she was texting Robbie, how far out are you? Because Robbie had to get a ride as well. She was texting Kouri at the same time, apologizing it was taking so long, and tells Kouri she'll keep her posted. She met up at the Maverick. Robbie came to the car, took the money, left, and came back and gave her another baggie with pills. Robbie told her there were 15 to 20 in there, and these were a lighter blue color. It was starting to get late, so she was asking Kouri what to do with the pills. And this was while she was on her way back to Heber. Carmen went home and still had those pills. She reached out to Kouri and said, what do you want me to do with them? Kouri said she would come to pick them up, and she did in Carmen's driveway. She said before Eric's death, she had never bought drugs from Robbie. Then she learned Eric had died from one of Kouri's aunt's employees a day or two after he passed. She did speak to Kouri about Eric's death a couple of days after. She was driving with a friend named Nick Bonsavage, and they were on their way to drug court to get a drug test. She put that call on speakerphone so Nick heard the whole conversation. Carmen asked Kouri, please tell me these pills were not for Eric. Kouri said no, they weren't. She said Eric died of a brain aneurysm. But after that conversation, Kouri asked her to buy drugs again. She asked if she still had the hookup, and they bring in a text exchange between her and Kouri. Now, when they started to bring this text exchange in, it got really heated with the defense attorney and the judge. So we went to a break. But here's my theory. After Eric's dead, Kouri doesn't need fentanyl anymore. My theory, my speculation, totally my 2 cents. I think Kouri planned to plant those around the house because she probably had a good idea at some point she would be investigated. Kouri texted Carmen asking, "Still have your hookup?" Carmen says yes. WTF. You're dealing with enough crap to worry. She said, okay. This was the third time that Carmen had arranged to buy from Robbie. Kouri said her investor would put money under the doormat at Kouri and Eric's house in Camas. Nick went with her to Kouri's house to get the money, but there was no money in the front or the back, so she rang the doorbell. Kouri answered and told her to come inside. She gave Kouri a hug, and then Kouri asked if she could write her a check. Carmen says yes, so they bring in the check in the courtroom that Kouri wrote. It was for $1,300, and the memo says Construction Clean Midway. Carmen said Kouri did not owe her money for any cleaning, and she's never in her life cleaned a house for $1,300. Carmen then went straight to the bank with Nick. They showed the deposit slip from March 9th, 2022, and Carmen was in the negatives, so she had to deposit enough to cover that, and then they cashed out the balance to her. Her and Nick touched base with Robbie, who was taking longer than he thought. So her and Nick went to some thrift stores in Orem County. And during this, she was texting back and forth with both Robbie and Kouri. Robbie came back 20 minutes later and said he couldn't get his friend to answer the door, so he told them to follow him. They went to a complex, but Carmen didn't go to the door with him. They sat in the car about 20 to 30 minutes, and she was texting Robbie, "This is taking too long, let's go." Robbie said he got his friend. He was just asleep. Carmen had given Robbie $400. Nick got $300, and then Carmen kept $300. So Robbie came back with 15 to 20 pills in a clear baggie. They were the same shaped pills, but a little bit of a darker blue. It was getting late, so Nick dropped her off, and she texted Kouri and asked what to do with the pills. And it was just the same routine at the Midway house. After that, she did no more drug deals with Robbie and has never been back to that Maverick gas station in Draper. Later, Robbie contacted her and said he had more, and if her friend needed it, let him know. Carmen reached out to Kouri, who said no, her investor had left town. That was it for Direct. On Cross, they're doing exactly what I thought they would do, focusing on her addiction issues and her criminal history. They hand her a binder to refer to, and those are transcripts from interviews in April and May of 2023. After your arrest in 2023, how many times after you got out did you meet with Detective O'Driscoll and Detective Maynard? She said 3 to 4 times. Sometimes they would check on her ankle monitor because it wasn't charging, or they would ask about her part in all of this, like, where were you at this time? She thinks they recorded these conversations, but she's not 100% sure. They did drive her places while she was in jail, like to the courthouse. And once they drove her to the courthouse when reporters were there, but she said they did not have any conversations about the case with her to and from. She has met with the prosecutors. They had the initial meeting and then a couple times over the last few weeks to go over her testimony to prepare her. She said they did not correct her if she answered wrong, and they talked about how the defense would bring up her past and how it would probably make her feel. They did not give her advice on how to answer any of the questions. She said she was the one asking them for things to refresh her memory since those original interviews with detectives was almost 3 years ago. She talked to Nick Bond-Savage about her cooperating. The defense says, "You told him, I don't remember what happened. You got to help me out here." She said, meaning when they were in the car and he went with her. She just didn't remember the dates. The defense says, because they told you the dates, and Carmen says, no, they just came back to her. Do you have any mental health diagnoses? No. Defense, are you sure? And she says yes. The defense says anxiety. She does have that. Do you take meds? No. Are you medicated today? No. For drug court, you have been arrested for a number of felonies, and she says she was. Her drug court is on pause, and the defense throws in congratulations for staying clean. They talk about drug court being hard, and then they go through all of her charges. She started drug court September 15th, and then by the 22nd, she missed therapy and group therapy, and they issued a warrant. The defense says October 6th, 8th, and 10th, you tested positive for benzos, and that was addressed in court. What benzos were you taking? And she said Valium. She was sanctioned for that. Defense points out in November you missed therapy, and they go on to point out the time she's missed. Carmen says sometimes it was just due to work and not being able to get there in time. She tested positive for meth on January 28th, 2022, and then she asked to be retested. But she admitted that she was using and she failed the test again. Carmen said that's what addicts do, and the defense says yes, addicts lie, and Carmen says active addicts. Carmen has held her own. Very credible, like her as a witness. She seems very disturbed by all this. The defense says you were using the day you bought drugs from Susan, and the times you were picking up drugs, you were high. Carmen says not every time, but she does admit that she was using on a regular basis. She said she was getting better, but she got arrested for driving with a suspended license. And then there was an order to show cause filed in drug court. So Carmen had to go to court and explain what happened. The judge would decide if she could stay in drug court or get kicked out. But she was arrested on April 26, 2023. And the next day, detectives come to talk to her. They told her they found a firearm under her bed, and that put her in big jeopardy in drug court. The investigators told her that they thought Kouri killed Eric with a fentanyl overdose. This was the first time she had heard from someone officially that he died from an overdose, although she had heard that from a coworker, and that is when she called Kouri, and Kouri said it was a brain aneurysm. She told investigators she did not do fentanyl, but her daughter did and almost died from it. The defense brings up she told investigators she wanted to go to Vegas to visit her fiancé, and the judge let her go. Carmen said that was before she started cooperating with investigators. After that, the detective asked if she wanted to help with their investigation, and she said she needed to think about it. She said it was a lot to process while being in jail, and she was facing some very serious time. The investigators came back May 2nd with a DEA agent, and they told her she could face even more time because if you provide drugs that kill someone, that's possibly 20 years in prison, but they did say they could help her. So she told investigators about Kouri asking for pills for her investor. This was a low blow right here. I don't like it. I don't think the jury's going to like it because I think she's very credible and remorseful on the stand, frequently having to wipe her eyes. The defense asked her about a learning disability she had, and she didn't want to talk about it. The judge said she had to, so she said she has low education. The defense asked about Roxy's, which are OxyContin pills of a higher dose. Carmen wasn't sure about the dosage. Defense, Susan got you oxycodone, and in your interview on May 2nd, you said you left those pills at the fire pit at the house in Midway. She doesn't remember, so they have her turn to a page in this huge book they gave her. And at that time, you said, I left the pills at the fire pit in Midway, which is different than what you said today. Is it fair to say you would remember better 3 years ago? Carmen says no. Did someone tell you something that you said was wrong? No. In that interview, you told detectives Maynard and O'Driscoll and Swarson that you never did a hand-to-hand exchange with Kouri. Carmen says that's correct. But today, you said you gave those pills to Kouri, and Carmen says yes, in my driveway, and they were $600. You fronted the money, and she said yes to Susan. Carmen also points out she made no money for doing that. And the defense says not a very good drug dealer, and Carmen says right. What a horrible thing to say. The defense says you risked drug court, and Carmen said, I thought Kouri was a friend. You said I picked up the money from the fire pit, and you left the pills in the fire pit. And the detective said you have to be very clear. And the defense says you were doing your best to tell them what happened, and Carmen says yes, but it was a lot to process. You said you would fight hard to stay in drug court, and they said, lucky for you, we're on your side. And as long as this relationship continues, we're here for you. Carmen doesn't remember that, so they have her turn to a page, and then she says yes, she told them she would do what she could. You told them through the last 6 or 7 interviews that you had memory problems. Carmen said maybe not those exact words, so they have her turn to a page, and she says yes. And you said you had fried your brain doing drugs, and you said that numerous times? Yes. They said helping them out, you need to give us the details to be sure Kouri gets convicted for murder. Now, at this point, the defense wants to bring in a demonstrative video for impeachment, and they play an interview with her and detectives. They say they've talked to the prosecutor and drug court. They're looking to pull your drug court deal and ask for 7 years. And the only way they're willing to help you is to tell us the details to ensure Kouri gets convicted of murder. So then they stop the video and Carmen says, yes, that's what they said. The defense says you're willing to do whatever it takes to keep from going to prison. Carmen says, I'm just moving forward with the truth, even if that means incriminating myself. Defense says you told investigators you needed a blueprint because you didn't know what happened. You said to lay out what you want. Carmen said, no, not what you want. So they have her look at a transcript and she says, I'll need a blueprint, but I'll do whatever it takes. During that meeting, Detective O'Driscoll asked you to write down everything you could remember to help with the next meeting. And did you do that? She said, no. You said these pills from Robbie were light green. They pull up a photo and she said that these are darker and what she got was lighter. The detectives say that you asked for blues. Carmen says yes. Sergeant O'Driscoll tells you M30s are fentanyl. And you say, okay, I see. That's how much I don't deal with it. Carmen tells the defense attorney she doesn't know anything about fentanyl. Kouri never asked you for fentanyl, correct? Carmen said, I told her what Robbie had and she said to go ahead and get them. Defense, that's the first time you said that, right? You never said Kouri asked for fentanyl. Carmen says yes. And you kept saying you got Roxy's. Carmen said from Susan, yes. That's the first drug transaction, by the way. The defense really was trying to confuse her. And it was really obvious. And I have to say, cross-exam was very all over the place. And I would venture a guess they lost some of these jurors in the process. Kouri asked for the Michael Jackson drug and you had to Google it? Yes. They kept telling you you must have given her fentanyl. And Carmen doesn't think so. So they have her turn to another page in the transcript. You say, I guess she asked for fentanyl. Otherwise, why would we be talking about fentanyl? Carmen said when she contacted Susan and she put her in touch with Robbie, he said he had fentanyl. She told Kouri he has fentanyl. Kouri said, get it. Defense says this is a new story you've never told before, but on this day you said, how else did I get fentanyl in my head? And the detectives told you it was fentanyl. It came from them. The only people who talked about fentanyl were the detectives. And Carmen said they told me he died from fentanyl. The defense says you're confused in this interview. You said you dropped the oxys from Susan in the fire pit. Then you say you give Kouri the pills in the driveway. But you said those were green pills you got later? Carmen said no. The ones Susan gave me, Kouri picked up from my driveway. Defense, you're saying here you're talking about 3 transactions. And Carmen reads the transcript and said the third one was the fire pit. Defense, but you don't say the ones from Susan were exchanged in the driveway, but later on you say it was in a box with coffee cups. Carmen reads the transcript and said one was in the closet in a cup in the house. But Carmen said it does not say that was the first. Defense, when did you leave it in a cup in the closet? Carmen thinks that was the third time. Defense, the original third one or the new third one? Because originally you said only 3 transactions and now you're saying 4. Finally, the state objects. Do you know when you left the pills in the cup in the Midway house, an approximate date? Carmen doesn't know. Y'all, if I ever have to recall dates other than like my kid's birth and the day Grammy died, I'm screwed too. I couldn't tell you what happened last month on a specific date. The defense asked if it was after February 11th. Carmen said that was the 3rd time at the Midway house. The 2nd time was in her driveway. What was inside the Midway house when you went inside? Carmen said it was empty except for some construction stuff, but Kouri said there would be a box with coffee cups in the closet. Defense, you tell them again your memory is messed up and foggy. Then they come back and say the new 4th transaction was after Eric died. She doesn't remember. You said just write it all down and I'll sign it. Carmen said they wanted her to write it and she didn't want to. Now, I just want to point out, they forced her to say she had a learning disability. She was very hesitant to do it on the stand. Ultimately, the judge said she had to. I really hope the jury caught that maybe she didn't want to write it down because she had difficulties writing. The way they exploited her past drug use as well as her learning disability, I thought was in very poor taste. Carmen said she asked them to write her statement as she gave it. The defense says, and sign whatever they wrote. And Carmen said, not whatever they wrote. They would write what I said. Defense, May 3rd, Detective Maynard comes back. And the interview starts out with him saying, because what we came up with yesterday, you're not going to be charged. And you said, I'm willing to do whatever? Yes. Defense, they say they'll have to talk to Susan, and they tell you Susan could be charged with murder, but not because you're helping. And Carmen says yes. They bring up Nicole Cummings. Carmen's asked how she knew Nicole. Carmen said she was my roommate's son's girlfriend. Carmen was renting a room, and her kids stayed there, and her son's girlfriend did as well. Nicole was a user, and the defense says you reach out to her to get something stronger than what you got from Susan because Kouri said she needed something stronger. Carmen asked Nicole if she can get some pills like Roxy 30 or Blues. What are Blues? Carmen said Blues are a man-made drug. Defense, in 2022, were Blues not fentanyl? Carmen said Blues are Blues. She said her friend gave her Robert's number, and the defense says, so they're trying to help you figure out the dates you bought from Robert? Yes. They tell you contacted him twice for drugs by looking at your phone? She says yes. I think we would all need a little help in that area. She said she told them if they could get her phone, she could piece it together. He was stored in her contacts as Robbie Nicole. Defense, they say you contacted him twice for pills, and you said right. You say, I hope that helps you. And they said, well, we need more details. And Carmen says, yeah, they needed more details. May 3rd is when you say you fronted the money to pay Susan. Yes. But the day before, that's not what you said. So they have her turn in this huge book. And the defense says you said the money was left in the fire pit. And you say I never exchanged money with Kouri. Yes. A detective told Carmen that her cooperation was a big get-out-of-jail-free card, and that was Detective Maynard. Detective O'Driscoll says this whole case depends on you, and you need to finish painting that picture because we don't have enough yet. Carmen says yes. So you go through the story again and tell them, Kouri said I need some pills for an investor with back problems. And then you say you know for a fact the first 2 times the pills weren't fentanyl. Carmen corrects the defense attorney and says the first one wasn't fentanyl. So that was it for the day. She'll be back on cross tomorrow. I really, really think the prosecution is going to do fine cleaning this up. That defense attorney was all over the place. I mean, a lot of us in chat got really confused. Honestly, I think Carmen came across very, very credible. She looks like somebody who is trying to get her life together. And we've always heard that Carmen has struggled with the fact that what she did for Kouri ended up killing Eric. If I'm on that jury, I see her as somebody who is trying to right a wrong. And look, it happens all the time. People get deals when they need to get the person responsible for a murder. We just went through that in the au pair trial with Brendan Banfield. This is the first time anybody ever got a deal. And the woman's been clean for 4 years, so I hope the jury recognizes that. We'll see what tomorrow brings, but that's it for now. Hope you have a good rest of your evening. We will see you soon.